Welcome to Young and Adulting, a podcast of the young adults community at Christ Fellowship Church. Our hope is to create a safe place for authentic conversation around the ins and outs of life as we all try to navigate following Jesus in the world we live in today. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the conversation.
Welcome back to another season of the Young and Adulting podcast. My name is Tyler with my co-host and good friend Alec Bell.
What's up?
Yeah, come on. It's going to be a good day. Joined by very special guest, Janna Johns today. But before we jump into the conversation, we are in a brand new season, and it's called What I Wish I Knew. And really this conversation kind of spawned out of us talking as young 20s and even 30-somethings going, there's a lot we don't know, and we want to lean on those who are a little bit further in life, in faith, and their walk with the Lord, and maybe experiences to go, what do you wish you knew when you were our age, to speak into some wisdom and insight? So really excited for today's conversation and where it's going to take us. So Janna,
Yes.
You look after all of our groups at Christ Fellowship, director of groups. You're passionate about people and community, but you also have incredible stories to share, incredible stories. But before we get to some of those stories, maybe a little bit about you, your journey, any fun facts.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to be here today.
I love it.
So thank you. So I'm a Midwest girl.
Come on.
I was born and raised in Michigan. I bleed green. Go Michigan State Spartans.
You're wearing green today.
I know,
Let's
because
go.
I bleed green.
Come on.
So I actually grew up in a Christian home. So I grew up in a Christian home. I went to a Christian college. But when I got to that college, I actually started walking away from the Lord, as it sometimes happens, So I had a ton of friends. They were just not friends that were going to lead me in the right direction. So I went through a season where I'm like, okay, I got to get things right back with God. I know where I came from. I know who to go to. So I need to go on a missions trip. That way I can just kind of recenter, like where I am with God. And I didn't have a great understanding of the Christian walk at that time.
How old were you?
I was 20 years old.
20 years young.
20 years young,
Come on.
yes. So I decided I was going, well, I didn't decide, but a friend showed me about going overseas to the jungles of Venezuela.
Okay.
So I actually, at 20 years old, it was the summer between my sophomore and junior year, I went to the Amazon and I spent 6 weeks. Literally, I stayed in a hammock for those 6 weeks. I was in the middle of the jungle. We took showers in the Amazon around the piranhas, and so I was 20,
Yeah.
it was exciting. But at the same time, it was also truly the first time, because back then they didn't have these podcasts. They didn't have all these cell phones. So it was the first time that I actually saw that there were people that were dying and going to hell because someone wasn't willing to go to the Amazons or the jungles or to be uncomfortable to share the gospel with them. And so that is where started my journey at the age of 20. At the age of 22, I moved to the jungles of Papua New Guinea.
From one jungle to another.
That's crazy.
So if you don't know where Papua New Guinea is, it's just north of Australia. So you literally take the globe, you flip it around.
So from Michigan
Yes.
to Papua New Guinea.
To Papua New Guinea. Yes.
Like not your average transition.
No, not your
You know what I
average.
mean? Into the
And the
next
crazy
season.
thing is, I'm a city girl. It's not like I was in like the country in Michigan. But so I moved to Papua New Guinea for 3 years. I was there. I helped with the missionary kids school. I was in and out of the jungles that they had there. I was sharing that I lived in a house that's probably no bigger than this room, actually. I lived there, and they had these walls that were just weaved like they were grass, and then
Okay.
the roof was grass as well.
Yeah,
So
not lights like this room. And
no. So it was also a time where we lived around villages that didn't know Christ, and so they had all of their own culture, their own worldview, and it was so dark. It was so dark. So there were some nights where the ladies would come and run, and they would hide me in the garden because 2 villages were fighting across where we were at. And you'd wake up the next day, and one of the villages just didn't exist anymore.
Wow.
Because it was burned to the ground, and with guns and with arrows. And it was, again, a time where God just showed me that there are people that don't get to see what an abundant life looks like.
Yeah.
They have no understanding. They don't know who God is. They don't know who Jesus is. And so that really started where I had spent almost 20 years in missions. So I was able to help at our missions Bible school with single women who were deciding whether as a single they should go overseas or not. So one thing about me is that I'm not married. I've never been married. And then I spent 8 years in Thailand before I moved to Florida. So that's a little bit in a nutshell of what my journey has looked like.
So much.
Like.
There's so
There's
much
so much.
there.
Now, Jen, if I can, I want to go back to Venezuela for a second.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to get the picture. So you
Okay.
were following Jesus, but not following Jesus.
Correct.
But then, how did you get convinced to go on a 6-week-long
Stands out
missions
right.
trip? I mean, I feel like I got convinced to go on a week-long mission trip to the Dominican Republic, and beaches were involved. But was that your first mission trip that you'd ever gone on? And what was that process like of saying yes to 6 weeks? And then to follow up on that, 6 weeks turned into 20 years of mission. So
Yeah.
what did that 6 weeks do in your heart, in your life, that changed the course of how you thought, how you believed, and how you saw your life?
That's a great question. So I had been to Mexico on a 2-week mission trip previous, but again, it had a lot to do with beaches and,
Yes.
things that were already
Ziplining.
set up. Yes, which is all great things, But when I was in that season of not walking with the Lord, my understanding of the Christian life was a little skewed. I thought that if I did enough good things, then God would love me again, and I wouldn't feel so lonely amongst all of the group of friends that I had. So when I initially thought of a missions trip, I thought, well, it doesn't get any closer to God's heart than that.
Yeah.
So I went to the board, and they had actually missions trips in the U.S., and I was like, no, I've really made some bad choices. I need to go overseas. So the funny thing, and again, this is dating me, is that we didn't have the internet back then or Google. So my very first boyfriend in 4th grade was a missionary to Indonesia, and he would send me little letters and he had like a pet monkey and everything. So I remember this. So this is years later. I'm now 20. So I called up. This was back when you actually called up the operator and you told them the name of someone you were looking
Is it
for.
like
It's
that one?
exactly what it was.
I love that.
Sorry for the
Actually, it was just a 0. You only had a 0, and
someone answers the
and
phone.
someone answers the phone. Yes. And so then you're like, so I'm looking for Perry Nichols. Well, what state does he live? I don't know. And lo and behold, he had been going to the missions Bible school. So I got his number, and he's the one that had connected me with New Tribes Mission at the time. It's now called Ethnos 360.
Okay.
And that was when I ended up going over there. And so during those 6 weeks, again, was when I really saw for the first time that, I knew that God's heart was for everyone to come to know him.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see that there were people that wouldn't get to know him, get to know God, and that they are living in such a dark and a witchcraft type world that it was then that really changed my heart. And so, but not completely. I actually thought I was going to be just someone who supported other missionaries.
Yep.
And I ended up going to Bible school because after a 6-week trip, I couldn't afford to go back to the college I was going to. And so when I went to the Bible school, it was 66 books of the Bible. You learned all 66 books of the Bible. And it was where I was able to really dig in and see the Christian life and to see that God already loves me immensely. But because he loves us all, he wants others to come to him as well. And so that was when the journey kind of switched over. And then they asked me to go to Papua New Guinea for a year at 22. I remember telling my mom, hey, Mom, I just want you to know I'm going to be moving to the jungles of Papua New Guinea for a year, so I'm not going to see you. Click. I literally hung up on my mom,
Just like a little info.
It
Just
really,
drop it
Ready for
in.
any responses.
no
just,
responses.
If you want to know where I am,
you won't be able to contact
You're
me.
right.
call the operator.
Right.
And so we actually, that was when I did move there, we could fax each other. So that was back with fax machines. I don't even know if you guys know what fax machines are.
Yeah, but some of y'all, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they could call me once a month, and it was $3 a minute.
Wow.
So they actually would have to set an alarm of my mom could
Right.
talk, my dad, and they would that was like they had set aside $200 a month just to call me once a month.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, Janna, you've been to some pretty amazing places. Like I said, Papua New Guinea, Thailand, Venezuela, Mexico. I'm sure there's others in there. What are some of your like crazy adventure stories of being in these places? Obviously, very different from where we are in the United States. So, would love to hear some stories, maybe some crazy ones you got to experience.
Or weird foods.
Oh,
any
yeah.
of it.
Anything.
Yes. Well, I have a lot of stories. So it's a matter of just doing it in the amount of time that we have here.
True.
But let's let's start with the crazy food. So in Papua New Guinea, you had to fly everything in. So it was a whole new concept of living off the land. So like they would have things like tree bark that they would turn into like food that tasted like cardboard, or there was one time I was going to go visit a friend in her village. And so we had to helicopter in. And so the wife was like, can you just bring us a 2-liter of Coke? Like a 2-liter. We haven't been out of this village for 8 months. Can you bring us a 2-liter of Coke? So I'm like, sure. So I brought in this 2-liter of Coke, and her husband was furious because by the time you get it from Australia to the Papua New Guinea, and then you get it on the helicopter, that 2-liter, now this was back before when it was like 50 cents, ended up costing $34.50 for one 2-liter. Yes. So it was definitely, you didn't get a lot of choices to have American food or even Western food.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I went to Thailand that I really got to experience a lot. And some of that was before I went to Thailand. And this is one thing I encourage everyone, if you're thinking about going somewhere in another culture, was that I decided I was going to eat everything that was put in front of me.
That's a resolve.
Everything. I was like, God,
It's bold too.
I knew from Papua New Guinea that food is relational everywhere we go.
Yep.
And so I said, and I'm like, really, who doesn't like Thai food? You got pad Thai, you got pad see eut, you got these things. Who doesn't love Thai food? So when I went there, they all of a sudden started to put some raw buffalo in front of me to eat.
Yum.
And raw pork in front of me. And they had these amazing spices, but it totally goes against what I've heard my whole entire life, And so
That's rare.
Yes. And so I have some pictures of what that even looks like.
Yes.
That's in there. And so we'll be able to see some of that. But there was one time I went to my friend's house, and in their sink was this live iguana. And I'm like, what?
Just hanging out?
Just hanging out. And I'd never seen it before. So I'm like, oh, did we get a new pet? And they looked at me so confused. They were like, no, that's dinner.
Dinner.
And I was like, I'm sorry. And they were like, yeah. I'm like, how is that going to be dinner? Next thing I know, they bop him on the head. He passes out, and then they just start boiling they made 5 different dishes out of this iguana.
And he was just hanging out in the sink.
He was just hanging out in the
He had
sink.
no idea what was coming for him. Dang.
But I do have to say, probably one of the biggest surprises that I ever gotten. So at Christmas time, they were bringing out like the special meal for everyone. Like this is the only, like we have it at Christmas time. And so it kind of looks like spaghetti. Like you have like these noodles, and so you're like, okay, we're looking good. You have like this red sauce, and you're like, okay, in your mind, you're trying to like place like, this looks like spaghetti. I'll just think that it's spaghetti. And then I should never ask what I'm eating before I eat it.
That's a good rule.
That is a good rule.
I should never have done that. So what they replace meat with is actually chunks of coagulated blood.
I'm sorry.
Whose?
Blood? Where's? From
Animals.
Whom? Okay.
So it's not people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you never
know.
But even still. So it would be like just chunks of coagulate, and then the whole red sauce was actually blood.
Wow.
With these special sauces in it. And so, so that got to be our special Christmas.
Now, when we talk about this, are you eating like a bowl of it, or is it just like, I'm going to taste a little bit and thank you very much?
Thank you.
So I made the mistake at first that I would just like get it down as quick as I possibly could. But the thing is, I found out very quickly in Thailand that if you leave your bowl empty, that means you're still hungry.
Oh.
So they actually give you a whole nother bowl of it. So I learned to start eating really, really slow.
Yeah.
And
It's almost like you're okay with leaving a little bit. Like, oh, thank you so
yes,
much.
I'm full, you know.
Wow.
But I do have to say that God, as he always does, even used that experience, because I found out years later from my friends that they said, Janna, you could go to villages, you could go to events, you met family members that most Westerners have never been, because we were never afraid that you're going to be offended by our way of life or by our food or by, and so I was able to build relationships that I would have never been able to build if I would have gone in with, this ain't right, or I'm going to get sick, or I'm going to be worried about this, you know? And I definitely think going into other cultures or even meeting different cultures that are here, you know, in West Palm or in our area is just, I think, not going in with no, we have it right. Your stuff is weird, you know, but maybe that it's just different.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things. They also shared in Thailand that if you eat alone, the food is not good. So for the introverted person in me, after 21 days of being out with people straight, I'm like, can I just have one meal by myself?
Yeah.
I don't even care if it doesn't taste good anymore, you know? But so I had other experiences that I could definitely tell you about. I had a ton with learning language.
Yeah.
So I, after 2 years, I became fluent in Thai. And so I could read and write in Thai. But Thai is actually a tonal language. So you can actually say one word 5 different ways, and it has a different meaning. So like the word ma. So you could say it ma, 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 ma. And they all have different. So you're either calling someone a tree, you're asking someone to come here,
Wow.
So I have quite a few stories that unfortunately are too inappropriate to actually say on this podcast. But let me tell you,
Love it.
I was so embarrassed that I didn't go back to see these friends for 2 weeks afterwards. But I do have one that I can share with you guys. So I had gone back to Thailand in 2019 to go back, and I'd moved to Florida in 2015. So I hadn't been to Thailand in 4 years. And so I went back and I was sharing with the church about small groups and groups back here in the U.S. and community. And so I was sharing with them that a lot of people come because, or go to groups because they feel ngai. But what I was supposed to have said is because they feel ngai. And so, right, can you hear the difference in that?
The subtle difference.
So when you're talking to them, so then they start laughing and I'm like, oh no, what did I just say? And so my intention was to say a lot of people go to groups because they feel lonely and they want community. But instead I said a lot of people join groups because they're stupid.
Perfect.
So who chooses the same word with a different tone from lonely to stupid?
That's great. The opportunities for miscommunication with a language like that has to be insane.
the roof.
Whether it's people talking in the background or whether you're just great at hearing.
Imagine if you're sick, you know?
Right.
Like if your throat's a little, hi.
Or as Westerners, we like to talk with excitement.
Totally.
You know?
Oh, absolutely.
And it just changes things.
That's a great point.
And so they are always like, why are you guys always yelling? And I'm like, I'm not yelling, but it's because we're always using inflection in our voices.
Wow.
That's great. Well, you were talking about groups, and I can't imagine what it's like to go into a foreign context, culture at 20 and then begin to build a life and trying to figure out the nuances and complexities of just community and meeting people. And it's no shocker that we're in one of the most isolated generations and time periods. We're maybe most socially connected through social platforms, but I don't think that always facilitates like genuine connection. So when you look back on your life, when you think about maybe some lessons you learned, what did you wish you knew maybe about the power of community? And I know you talked about being an introvert, but for those who are maybe struggling to get themselves into the right community, what would you say things that you learned about the power of community?
Yeah, I think that's so good. Would you believe that I didn't learn about the community until I lived in Thailand? That was actually the first time I had spent with a community of biblical believers in a group.
Wow.
So I think it's ironic that it was a little bit later. So I think what I would have wished I would have known back, and I talk about being an introvert, is that how much loneliness can affect you. It can affect you physically. It can affect you emotionally, spiritually. Anytime that you're alone is when it's like a breeding ground for Satan to come in. You know, it allows you to watch things you wouldn't have watched. You know, it allows things in your thoughts, or I'm not loved, or I stick out, or I'm the only single person that's here. And so even as of recently, and within the last 6 months, even the, I don't know if you've heard this, that the Surgeon General has actually, there's health risks that are so associated with prolonged loneliness, that it's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Like that is the equivalent of what loneliness. And so that's why we're passionate here at Christ Fellowship of saying, hey, come to Tuesday night young adults, Thursday night college nights. We have groups for you. We want you here on Sunday. We want you to be digging into God's word, because I didn't have that. And so because I was choosing the wrong friends and the wrong community, I had loads of friends around me, but I didn't have the community that as Pastor Todd always says, you know, like, I'll show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Right.
Yeah.
And so even when in Ecclesiastes, it says that 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. So it was really that time in Thailand and those friendships. And so if I could encourage you guys now is to be developing those friends that are around you that is going to lead you in the right direction. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Like, I ate different food.
Right.
Yeah.
I spoke some of the wrong things, you know. I remember asking a friend of mine, like, how do you guys use the restroom without toilet paper? And so one night she grabs me. It's a good question, right?
I didn't know it was a thing.
It is. No, they don't have toilet paper anywhere. And they have little squatty potties there too. So one night she grabs me out from a group and she grabs me outside. I'm like, where are we going? And the next thing I know, she just dropped her drawers. She did her thing and she did a little shake, shake, shake and said, that's how we do it.
Okay.
Shake it off.
But shake it off. But it was such a reminder that sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you might on a weekend say, hey, I don't want to come in this a big auditorium. But again, loneliness is going to breed where Satan can come in. But when you put the right voices around you, you're going to be able to have that great community.
That's great.
Yeah. Janna, did you have a hard time at first bridging the gap between cultures? I'm even thinking South Florida. We're such a, it's a melting pot for everyone. I mean, I'm not even from here. Tyler, you're not even from here. Like it's, Janna, you're not from here, but we're all down here. What would you say to the college student that is looking to bridge cultures, to bridge the gap between maybe some different ethnicities, some different cultural backgrounds? What advice would you give them? Because obviously you've done it multiple times in different cultures, and we'd love to know.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think first and foremost, just going in with a learner's heart. I think we often come in with, this isn't how I do it, or this isn't what we do in South Florida, for the few that really are from South Florida that live here. And I think that is for the college student, as well as someone even from my generation, is that we often are like, no, these kids just want to change everything. It needs to be the way it used to be. Or the younger generation is like, no, we know how to do it better. And so I would just say, rather than coming in with that, just coming in with a learner's heart and asking questions. Because, we do things. I learned when I went overseas, like some of the things that we do, like, why do we eat pie and we start at the tip and not start and turn it around and start with the crust?
That's a good question.
Right? So you're going to think about that, And so there's some things that we don't even know why we do it. And yet we are like, I'm going to die on a hill. This is how I eat pie.
Do you think that applies to pizza?
That's a very good question.
I don't know. Same
Could
thing.
you turn it around? though? That might be harder because you don't use a fork.
I actually do sometimes on the side of the crust just to get different conversation.
Yeah. But you don't
Sorry,
use
my
a
mind
fork.
was wandering. I was like, whoa, I could turn everything around. There's,
Yeah.
It was interesting too in Thailand. One of my friends had asked me, like, Jan, I don't understand, because they don't really have freezers there. But a friend of ours, they was able to get one in on a container, and so they're really particular in Thailand on things that expire. So she's like, Jana, I don't understand. You guys are all upset when we leave raw chicken out in the sun all day long, and yet you put this bread in this thing called a freezer and you bring it out and eat it 4 months later.
Right.
You know? And so it really got in my mind that we don't always do things right. We just do it different. And so I would embrace having different, like, embrace the difference, ask questions.
yeah.
And don't ask the why, because, again, I just asked you why we ate pie that way and you guys didn't know, you know, but it's part of our culture. And so just asking the questions of, like, how do you eat pie, you know, or how do you do these things? Because I really want to know those things. Mm-hmm. And then also, if you have an experience of going overseas, like, just really taking out of the mindset that you're helping the less fortunate, or they could be very happy in their lives and culture if they got this, you know. And I think sometimes when we go on missions trips or times when we go, we often come in with, I'm coming in to help. But again, no, I'm coming in to learn. And I pray that they see not me, not my culture, but that they see Jesus inside of me.
That's great perspective.
And so that's what I would encourage, even with all of the different cultures that we have here. Embrace it. Eat something that maybe is, you know, go to a different restaurant that you wouldn't normally go to and eat some things, and you might like it. Yeah. And for me, I came back to the States and oh my goodness. So I called it, we call it coming back to our passport country, because it wasn't home to me anymore. Thailand truly was home.
Wow.
So I came back to my passport country and I spent a lot of time in tears because do you know how many brands of tuna fish that we have that you can choose from?
I don't.
I don't know.
Well, ask your wives because there are a lot of choices. And I remember I cried in the tuna fish aisle because I was like, I just want to know what the best choice is. So I'm like, I'm ready to go back overseas, back home to Thailand where I knew things, you know. So just coming in with a learner's heart.
That's great.
That's incredible. That's so cool. Yeah, Jana, talk a little bit more about that. What was it like coming home? Because obviously cultures are so different. Like, I'm sure the tuna fish, from how you dress to what you watched on TV, like what was that process like, and has it given you an appreciation for both more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to make a confession. I just watched Mission Impossible for the first time the other day.
Let's go.
Because I was overseas during all of them. And so I watched the very first one to put that in a little bit of perspective. So I definitely felt more out of place coming back to the States, because when I went overseas, I knew things were going to be different, but I didn't expect things to have changed so much when I came back home. So in that almost 8 years I lived in Thailand, I had only been back in the States for a total of 7 weeks.
Wow. So
this wasn't a mission trip. It literally was my life.
It was your life. I mean, that translates to what, 1 week a year?
Yes. And actually I was there for almost 4 years before I actually came back to the States for any period of time. So, so it was difficult. Friends were different. I couldn't remember how to cook. I couldn't remember how to use a dryer. I hadn't used a dryer in 8 years. So I couldn't even remember how to use a dryer. Clothes, I was never in style because I didn't know. I was overseas the whole time. I didn't know what the styles were. I had to wear the same clothes. The same clothes I brought with me, I had to wear the entire time because in Asia, everyone's so small. I didn't fit in any of their clothes. So I didn't get to go shopping for 4 years.
Wow.
So I was always behind the times when I came back to the States.
Well, speaking of the times.
Yes.
I don't know if who are listening in or if you're watching can see, there's a photo album here. Look at that. That's pretty cool. A lot of questions, Janna. This is really, really cool. Talk a little bit about this book, what's in it, all that stuff.
Yes. So
what does Alec not know and no one else knows?
I have no idea what's in this book.
So in this book, the picture-wise is I went on a vision trip for 3 weeks of backpacking through Thailand. So I was able to experience things, different foods. It was the first time with the raw meat. I got sneezed on by an elephant.
Oh.
So you can imagine the residue that comes from an elephant sneeze.
Actually, it's actually hard to.
Oh.
Because that must be like a
doesn't,
bucket's worth.
Yes.
Sorry,
it
this is
doesn't
graphic.
just...
I mean, I feel like you have, I'm sure Judas sneezed on you.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't have a kid yet. My dog has sneezed on me, but an elephant is 100 times the size.
It's not spray, it's chunks. Let's just say that. So, but speaking of elephants, this book here is actually made from elephant poo.
No.
Yes.
Wow.
So feel free to handle it, open it. You can take a whiff if you like.
Everyone watching on YouTube.
Yes.
So practically, we're talking about cultures. Not to my knowledge, we have photo albums that are made this way in the States.
No.
Where did this idea come from?
And are other things made of poo?
A lot of their paper is made of poo.
That's resourceful.
Right? So yeah, they just you would go to they have these elephant sanctuaries, where they have saved elephants that didn't make it in the wild or things. And so you can watch them play soccer, and actually elephants paint. Honestly, the most amazing murals I had ever seen. And then they started realizing that elephants also just poo a lot. and
they're huge creatures.
And they're huge poo too. So when they, I think whenever they started realizing that you can actually create something out of all of this. And so they create photo albums, paper, all sorts of things.
God takes our mess and makes a miracle.
I just want to think of the first person that was like, I can use that.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know who that first person was.
I don't know.
Everyone was probably like, no. He's like, yes.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that came out in this conversation. And 5 minutes before we started recording, you told me that. I was like, don't say anything else. Don't tell Alec. Don't tell anyone else until we're talking about this. But maybe last thing today, you've experienced so much culture, so many life lessons as we talk about the subject of what we wish we knew. Speaking about the power of community and relationships to maybe the college student or the person listening who is disconnected, who is isolated, what would be your word of counsel or friendly advice from your vantage point in life that you would like to leave them with today as we close?
Yeah, I definitely would say push past whatever is keeping you from coming on Tuesday nights, coming and meeting up with biblical relations, having biblical friendships, because I think right now technology has allowed us to stay home and still feel like we're connecting with people.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I can get so invested in the people of TikTok that I actually feel like they're my friends, but they're not. And so really just whatever is holding you back, to know that God really does have so much more for you. And I spent years missing out on amazing friendships, amazing experiences, amazing opportunities because I kept coming up for reasons why they don't want me around, And like I said, I don't speak the language. I am single. Everyone else around me, I have a different color skin. And so just realizing that, it is so true what God says is that we are better together.
Right.
And so push past, whether that's a Sunday morning when you're trying to decide, do I sleep in or am I going to go to church? What if I don't know anybody there? What if I don't? But again, just you never know who's going to bless you, but you never know who you're going to be able to bless as well.
That's great, Janna.
And so just asking the Lord, hey, who are you going to put in my pathway today? And that might mean at Publix, that might mean at church, But if you're not in a group or in community, or you don't have a group of people that are going to encourage you or help keep you accountable, I would say today is the day. If you're listening to this, we want to help you. We want to resource you. We want to, I will have you over for Thai food.
Yep, let's do it.
So, because I am really so passionate about finding community and people being in community, because it's going to change your life.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. This has been such a valuable time, and been encouraging to be able to kind of chat about life experiences. My phone is going off right now. Just so thankful for the time that we've got together, and I know that this has blessed those who are listening. And so I still have lots of more questions about adventures and weird foods and
Janna on the podcast again.
Yeah,
Janna on the
we gotta bring it back
podcast
for
again.
Part 2.
I would love it.
Just super thankful for you and
Thank
for
you.
your ministry and leadership. And for those who've been tuning in, hope this bless you. Pray this encourage you today to get into community wherever you are at. And if you like this episode of the Young Adulting Podcast, make sure that you share it, like, subscribe to it so you can stay in the loop with all of our content. And we're excited. We're praying for you. And make sure to jump back in with us next Thursday for an episode. We love you. See you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Young and Adulting. Follow us on Instagram at cf.youngadults. And if there's a topic you'd like to talk about, we want to hear about it. Send us an email or leave a comment with your thoughts. We'll see you next time.